Good evening, everyone. I'm Monica Baum-Campania with Education for Tomorrow Alliance, and we are excited to share a very special guest with you this evening. We'll tell you a little bit more about her in a moment, but as you probably know, this is one of a series of speakers that we have throughout the semester to help you think about different career possibilities. Our speakers always have great wisdom and kind of those tips and how-to, so we encourage you to take notes as you go. And with that, I will turn it over to our program director, Corinne Coulter.
Great, thank you, Monica. Good evening, students. Welcome if this is your first time, and welcome back if you are returning. I feel like I say this every time, but there are a number of names that look familiar, and so we're excited to have you guys back, especially as you have one more day before your spring break. So we appreciate you guys joining us this evening. Yes, I'm Corinne, I'm the program director. I just want to give you a couple of logistics before we get started. We are in webinar form, so we cannot see you, but you will have an opportunity to ask questions on the back end. So I wanted to let you know that you can either use the Q&A, you can use the chat feature, or if you hover down under, like on the bottom of your Zoom bar, you'll see the raise your hand feature. Those are the three ways that you guys can connect with us to submit your questions. Once it's time for you to ask your question, I'll call your name, bring you over, ask you to unmute, and then allow you to ask your question. If you are someone that's submitting a question and you don't have a microphone, just let me know that when you're typing in your question so I don't bring you over and then we do the whole awkward, can you hear me type thing. If you are doing this for school credit, we do not have the forms that you need to fill out, but you just need to submit that back to your teachers or headmasters that directed you guys to join us this evening. So with that, I will turn it back over to Monica, who will help us introduce our speaker for this evening.
All right. I know a lot of you are interested in some version of healthcare, and so you will get lots of different insights into what that could look like as a career field for you. So we are delighted this evening to have Juanna Brandon join us. She is the Director of Patient Care Services for Texas Children's Hospital, The Woodlands. She's been with Texas Children's for 23 years and has had several leadership roles throughout the organization. She currently has oversight of inpatient nursing, which includes neonatal ICU, pediatric ICU, and the acute care unit. She also oversees outpatient services such as cancer and infusion, surgical, and emergency care. Brandon was also instrumental in an instrumental contributor to the trauma program development, including leading the team to a successful designation, which is a big deal, a really big deal in this field. She found her love for community nursing after serving in the Community Initiative Program, where she led several expansion, scope, and quality projects in partnership with Houston Methodist Willowbrook and St. Joseph's Hospitals. She's also played a critical role in the successful preparation of Texas Children's second community hospital, Texas Children's Hospital, The Woodlands, overseeing the emergency center. Prior to her transition to community setting, she held management positions at Texas Children's NICU at the Medical Center campus. She began her career as a graduate nurse providing excellent care to premature and critically ill newborns. Brandon earned her Doctor of Nursing Practice from the University of Texas Health Science Center in 2022. She has a Master's of Business Administration from Texas Women's University and holds a Bachelor of Science in Nursing from Prairie View A&M University. She completed the Rice University Healthcare Program and was the recipient of the Excellence in Neonatal Nursing Award by the March of Dimes, as well as the Browns Award in Nursing Leadership from the Good Samaritan Foundation. She's a certified nurse executive by the American Nurses Credentialing Center and a member of the American Nurses Association. She's a board member of the Houston Organization of Nurse Leaders and engages in community service through the hospital's drowning prevention program called SPLASH, which is swim, play, learn, and stay healthy. She is the wife and mother of 3 beautiful children and a dog, Coda. In her spare time, she loves to travel and support her family in competitive sports. She has a passion for sports and loves to dance. So there's a lot in there. We're very excited to welcome Miss Juanna Brandon with us this evening. Dr. Juanna Brandon.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. I am honored to be with you today, and I will tell you from the start that I've been where you are, and so I'm really excited to share my story. And I'm looking forward, hopefully you guys will find this talk engaging and just really can see where your career options can go in healthcare, but just in life in general. All right, I am going to share my screen. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
We're good.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to start by talking about the journey of Juanna Brandon, and I do have a disclosure. As a nurse, the one thing that's really hard for us to do, it's really hard for us to talk about ourselves. It's hard for us to brag on ourselves because we really feel like this is who we are. And so bear with me. This is very challenging for me, but I'm excited to share my story. Thank you so much for the introduction, Monica and Corinne. I really appreciate it. But I want to start off because I think it's important when you look at your life and trying to figure out what matters to you most. And so I've started the journey of Juanna Brandon. I am a wife first, a mother second, and then I'm a professional. And I will just say overall, just kind of looking back at this journey and preparing this to share with you all, I will say it's been fun. Definitely not without adversity, but I want to tell you now, because I remember sitting in your shoes, it does go by fast. So you blink and it will happen. All right, so where did the journey begin as a professional nurse? So I started my career, as Monica said, back in 2001. I actually just made my 23rd anniversary, and I started as a graduate nurse in the neonatal ICU. And so you say, what does that mean? Well, 23 years ago, when you when you graduate with a Bachelor of Science, you still have to take and pass your boards. And so at this time, you were able to start practicing before you passed your boards. I actually passed my boards in March, but I was actually already started as a nurse in the unit. The residency program in nursing is one of those things at Texas Children's. We're very fortunate to have such a program. And so there were probably about 25 people that were in my cohort in various areas of the hospital, but we all started together. There was probably about 10 or 12 of us in the NICU rotation. And it's so funny that a couple of weeks ago, we just opened our hospital in Austin, and I saw one of my cohorts. It's a bond that we will always have. We went through a 6-month program where we met monthly. We had books and different things that we had to share. So very fun journey. I will tell you, all of my professors in nursing school said, oh, you can't get an ICU internship. And I did. And so I was very fortunate to be able to get an ICU internship on the day shift. And so when I was looking back at this picture, I actually share this picture on my Facebook page every Nurses Week. And I share this, a parent actually took this. This is Miss Sarah, and she was right across the way from my primary that I took care of. His name was Cody. And so I love this picture because it really captures, this was just me doing my morning cares for her. Every morning I had a certain routine. And as you can see, she's super tiny, but she was so feisty. And the blue and the white thing you see, that is her breathing tube. And so, having a baby that's really feisty, they don't like having those breathing tubes, or ET tubes is what we call them, an endotracheal tube. And so it is always a balance. And one of the things that we have to do as a nurse to make sure that tube stays secure. So it's not as easy. As you can see here, she is, I'm trying to comfort her by, putting her pacifier in her mouth while I'm trying to navigate, making sure that I get all of her morning cares done. I will say the life of a nurse in a critical care unit is very busy. It's a lot of responsibility and not something that I ever take for granted. I would say that, there's you hear a lot of alarms going off. You have to be attentive. You have to make sure you give your medications on time. You are navigating that baby's care. And typically you have 2 patients. So if they need to go for an x-ray, or if they need to have a consult done, that's you on the phone, making sure that all of those things happen throughout the day. But it is a very rewarding job. You get to interact with families, and families begin to trust you. And so I don't take that lightly. And I always felt really, really, really passionate and fortunate to be able to take care of tiny babies like this. I took care of, I don't know how many babies in my career, but it's definitely something I'm still passionate about, neonatal nursing. I've been in the emergency center. I'll share my story where I've been across the organization, but definitely still have a love for the ICU nursing. All right, so um, as you guys can tell, one of the things I wanted to really tie this to blooming where you are planted. I really was thinking about my journey of really how I've grown. And I kind of look back at my life and say, you know what, it is like the growth of a flower. And so when you talk about blooming where you are planted, I spent 4 years as a bedside nurse. And you say, oh man, 4 years, that's a long time. However, you can see I wasn't just a bedside nurse. During that 4 years, I trained to precept other nurses. I remember when I was first asked to precept, I was a nurse about 2 years, and the educator came to me. She said, Juanna, I think you'd be a great preceptor. And I'm like, oh, I don't know. I'm still trying to learn everything. I didn't really think I was good enough really to be a preceptor. But I will tell you guys that every one of these experiences I had, I learned something and I gained something in my tool belt. And so one thing, one of my favorite thing about being a preceptor is you cannot show somebody how to do a job unless you really know the job. And so that was one thing that I really appreciated. It really showed me what I knew and what I didn't know. And so until you've mastered a skill or know something, so I would have to explain to a brand new nurse or a nurse that had experience, but sometimes I would get nurses from other states. And then at Texas Children's, we see the highest acuity babies all the time. So our experience level is really, really high. We see this high acuity all of the time. And so what I noticed was there would be nurses that came with experience, but they just didn't have that level. And so I did appreciate that experience. The next one I would say was probably one of my favorite roles as a charge nurse. This was the first time where I actually had to manage other people. I think when I was in high school, I was a cheerleader. I can't tell by my figure now, but I was. I love being a cheerleader. I was a captain of the cheer squad. So I've always had those natural leadership abilities, but I will tell you in a professional environment, being a charge nurse was very, very difficult. So the day in the life of a charge nurse in the busiest ICU in the country at that time, we had 74 beds and we were always busy. I had to make the schedule. I had to make sure that all the nurses got their breaks. I had to make sure that, anything that happened, we could accommodate babies coming off of transport, babies coming from our labor and delivery area. I'd have to facilitate discharges. I would have to talk to families that were not happy with our care, which was very uncomfortable because, we are trying to provide the best care. And so resolving conflict and making sure that the nurses had all the things that they need to have a productive day, that was my responsibility. And so I would say I probably learned the most in my charge nurse role starting off. And then just being involved in committee work on the unit. And so the first one, the scheduling committee, I think I was bamboozled by my nursing leader at the time, and she still works for Texas Children's, Jody. And she's like, Juanna, I think you'd be great at being on the scheduling committee. And I will tell you, one of the lessons that I learned most as a manager, and I still kind of take this with me right now, is that there's 3 things with your staff that you always have to make sure that you have mastered. One of them is scheduling. So I will tell you that that was the one thing, scheduling. Nurses work 3 days a week, some work 2 days a week, night shift, weekends, etc. And so you want to make sure you get their schedules right because that matters. That matters to their home life, etc. And so I learned that through the scheduling committee. I had to work with my team to say, hey, we have 10 nurses on one day and 4 nurses on the other day. Would anybody be willing to move? So I had to learn some negotiation skills, which I was like, oh gosh, I'm scared to walk up to Corinne and ask her to make this change, but I really need this change or the manager is going to get me. And so Anyway, that was a lot of negotiation and really trying to work with people and understand, hey, there were some times that, hey, you know, they couldn't make their schedule. So a lot of times I would have to change my schedule around some, you know, to accommodate, but this is where I really recognize the importance of working together. The retention committee, this is something I still do to this day. This is my superpower, is retention. I love people and I love pouring into people. And you'll hear that throughout my journey. I like to bring, excuse me, people together. Um, Next, I got to do transport. So transport was fun, very intimidating. So back in the day, we had two transport teams for the neonatal ICU. We had a ground transport team and we had a flight transport team. And so that was fun. We got to go to other hospitals, pick up pick up babies that were super sick. We worked with RT. And so driving in the back of an or not, I wasn't driving, but riding in the back of the ambulance, making sure that you're monitoring the baby, nothing's happening, talking back to the medical center to make sure we had a safe transport was super fun. And then L&D. And so, no, I was not an L&D nurse, but this was back in 2002 or 3. And so we would go to St. Luke's and we would catch high-risk babies. So babies that maybe were premature or maybe weren't doing well, we would go down. We had a little checklist and had a little delivery room right outside of the, or resuscitation room is what we called it, right outside of the delivery rooms. And so that was a lot of fun. But again, it pushed me outside of my comfort zone because I'm not in the comfort of my unit. I'm actually in another hospital in a resuscitation area. And then I know we talked about this earlier when I was a staff nurse. This was my first real award with the March of Dimes for excellence in neonatal nursing. And I was really proud of that award because it really talked and really spoke. And I was nominated by my unit educator, and which was very, very special to me. So that's my journey as a staff nurse. All right, so this is where the fun begins. So this is the real start of my leadership journey. And I'd say when you look back at it as a charge nurse, you are a form of leadership, but this is where you actually have direct reports. So I broke it up into my roles that I've had over the years, and you can see my progression in leadership. And so I highlighted a few things. Monica named a couple of them, but I'm going to expound on them a little bit. So the first one from 2005, that's when I got my first manager role. And, you know, when I applied the first time, I didn't get it. And so I'll never forget that. It was around my birthday. Shoot. And I was headed to Atlanta. I was so sad. I was so bummed out. And, you know, I called my mom. I cried. I was so upset that I didn't get it because I really worked hard. As you can see, I was involved in a lot of things on the unit and got raving reviews as a charge nurse and all of the things. But everything is always about God's timing, not yours. And so I didn't get it in August, but guess what? I got it in February. So not even 6 months later. And God just said, here you go. The role is yours. And so, you know, everything is about God's timing. So let's talk about the nurse manager role. Texas Children's is a big organization. I say this is the hardest role in the organization. I did it for 5 years. You know, the scope of the role, we do have a staffing requirement, and that just keeps the manager sharp in what they're doing. Most of the time, we will take on the role as charge nurse, but you can go into staffing. I will tell you the speed changes and the pace changes so quickly. You're just not as efficient when you don't do it every day. I could do certain things in my sleep. And, you know, when I stepped into the leadership role, I just couldn't do it as fast. And so I was responsible for the schedule. So it was a step above. I had to make sure that all of the schedule was balanced before it was out. I did coaching, counseling, development of teams. I did staff development. I started our retention committee. We started what we called a fun fund. And that was a fun thing to bring people together when people got married, not divorced, but married or had kids or anything like that. And so we would do like a picnic every summer and bring our teams together. Performance management. This is all about making sure that the nurses, every year we have to do our performance management tools. And so we have to get evaluated, which is a part of the process. And so I'd have to walk through that process and at the time, I probably had about 70 or 80 nurses underneath me. The newborn center was a monster. It was a lot to manage. And that's just nurses. I also had PCAs, which are our unlicensed support staff, as well as our secretaries. So a lot of different types of roles underneath you, which can be challenging, especially during that time. And then I was able to participate on some house-wide committees and, really that MD APP partnership. As a nurse manager, you have to work with your physician colleagues a lot. You got to work on things to make things better in the unit. And so this is really where I garnished really how important those partnerships were. Not that they weren't before, but this is definitely a staple in what you do as a nursing leader. All right, so then from 2010 to 2019, you say, golly, Juanna, you were in that role a long time, but I tell you, I was not in just one role. I transitioned a couple of times, but still had the same title. So I moved to our program called Community Initiatives in 2010. The first hospital I started at was Methodist Willowbrook. And so Texas Children's has partnerships with Methodist hospitals across the city, as well as at the time we had St. Joseph's, and we have probably about 11, and this partnership still exists to this day. We have our neonatologists, which are our doctors for our neonates that work at these facilities. And so this was my first time being outside of the medical center. Pushed me out of my comfort zone. So at the medical center, it's a big place, lots of things going on in the community. You're more of a jack of all trades, right? You don't have that specialization that you have at the medical center. And so when I transitioned over to Willowbrook Hospital, they at the time were a level 2 nursery. And so they wanted to go up to a level 3 nursery. And so level 3, that was my background. I had been doing it by this time, how long was that, guys? About 9 years or so. And so I took an adult ICU, and this was before Texas Children had their Pavilion for Women tower. I took an adult ICU and I made it into a private room NICU. And I will say I learned a lot. I was able to successfully get that team to a level 3, and they loved it. It was such a fun experience. I still have it over here as one of the most memorable things in my career. And then in 2013, I did transition to St. Joseph's Hospital. I'd say on this one, I took one for the team. Sometimes in leadership, the boss says, hey, we need help. You say, okay, I gotta go. And so I went to St. Joseph's. At this time in my career, I was doing a lot of renovations and building new things. And so that was exciting to me, coming up with floor plans, things as a nurse. I never thought I'd be doing this, but designing how it's going to look. And so I did a renovation, about $1 million project with St. Joseph's to renovate their NICU. So it's a lot of fun, a lot of work, working with contractors and design teams and facilities and all of those guys. So really taught me a lot, but I was able to transition all of our subspecialty services. NICUs, babies require a lot of, subspecialists. They need cardiologists, they need infectious disease practitioners, they need all kinds of subspecialists to really help them throughout their journey. And so I was able to do that at St. Joseph's. And then in 2016, I opened up the Woodlands. Well, it was actually 2017, but I started my journey in 2016. So again, you've got a neonatal nurse moving to emergency center. And so I'm so thankful. Catrice White, she is my leader currently. When we were opening the Woodlands, I saw it on Facebook in 2014, and I emailed my boss and I said, I'm going to the Woodlands. I've been living out this area for a long time. And so I asked her, I said, well, what areas do you have? And she's like, well, I've got NICU and PICU, and I've got the EC. And I always wanted to do EC. In fact, those are my 2 clinical areas that I wanted to do when I graduated. And so I asked her, I said, well, what do you need for the EC leader? She said, I just need a leader. Well, I'm a leader. Let me raise my hand. So I went and I learned everything emergency center. I spent time as a triage nurse. I spent time as a trauma nurse. I spent time doing everything I could do to learn how to be an emergency room nurse. And I did it. So very proud. It was stressful. I have a lot of gray hairs. I covered them up with my color, but a lot of gray hairs. But somebody believed in me. And I took a leap of faith and I learned that, hey, I wasn't born an ICU nurse. I was born Juanna, and I had to learn these skills. And so that was something I took total care of and said, hey, I can do this. And then during that time, I did get my master's degree from Texas Women's. That was back then, they did the hybrid classes. So I would go to class on Saturdays. My kids were a little bit older. My son was young, and I was kind of worried about that. And my mom was like, Jonna, he's so young, he's not going to remember. And so I was able to finish in 3 years. I'm really proud because I'm business minded. Never thought in a million years I'd be talking healthcare finance, but I love finance as far as healthcare, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. I won the Good Samaritan Award for leadership, and then I also got my board certification in nurse executive during that time. So now, my director of patient care services role. So again, Corinne kind of shared and Monica shared my background of the areas I oversee. They're all different, but I've got great leaders. And that's the thing, when you become a leader of leaders, you've got to trust your leaders. You know, that is their expertise. I let them run their units, and I'm there to remove barriers, make sure they have enough staff, you know, then they've got the resources they need to do a good job, because the further and further you get away from the bedside, I'm still passionate about patients. I'm still passionate about how we care for patients, because that's what I went into nursing for. And so now I have a different role. I have to make sure that my nurses have everything that they need. And so I'm always rounding to see, hey, what's going on? You know, when they're experiencing barriers, that's my job to go fix it for them. We talked about my trauma designation. Again, we were open a year, and the hospital decided, hey, we want both of our community hospitals to have trauma designation, and we did it. So we're a level 4 trauma center. At the medical center, they're level 1. There's a lot of infrastructure that you have to have in place. And so if we need someone, like if someone comes to our facility, we can easily transfer them to the medical center. Sexual assault forensic program. That's something that had never been done in the community. Again, having supportive leadership. They said, hey, what do you think about this? And I'm like, well, it hadn't been done, but I can do it. Let me see what it takes. And so we do have a program. We have nurses that are trained in forensic nurses and in nursing. And so we are able to care for those patients in the community. Drowning prevention with a splash program, talked about that a little bit. And again, as a director, I do lead a lot of our nursing across the system with retention, leadership development. I like to pour into others, like I stated a little bit earlier, as well as doing things like lunch and learns and fun different things for the staff. I was a member of the Leadership Montgomery County program in 2023, which was amazing. Really love that experience. We still have a tight-knit group and just really love that experience overall, and one that I'll always be indebted for. And then I am a board member for the Houston Organization for Nurse Leaders, and that keeps me busy as well. And then, like she stated, I did get my doctorate in 2022, and that was always a lifelong. I always wanted to be a doctor from the time I was probably 4 or 5. And so I was really excited. Now, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a doctor of nursing practice. However, it's still a practice field, and that's something that I enjoy. And so even though my parents, I think when I changed to wanting to be a nurse, my mom and dad were not very happy with me, but I hope I've made them proud. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about the significance moments of my career. And I don't want to kind of go into this in a lot of details, but we've talked about a lot of this before. So I added some pictures. Again, the first one I would say is just that charge nurse and leading people, because that's definitely my passion. The second one was moving to from the medical center to the community. And so this is a picture of me on the left, and this is them highlighting me with the ribbon cutting for the NICU renovation project in 2014 at St. Joseph's. St. Joseph's, actually my oldest daughter was born at St. Joseph's. And so look at all the folks we had. We had the congresswoman there. We had the city council members there. So it was a big deal, and I got to get highlighted and that's me in 2014. And then opening a new hospital in a new clinical area. This picture right here was on April 11th of 2017. This was before we actually opened the door. This is my team that worked that morning, and our physician colleague, Dr. Allen, is there. And so really proud. Some of these members are still on my team, and they still call me, and I go down there. I always have a love for the emergency center, specifically here because I helped open the place and design it and all the fun stuff. So this is our team. We actually had a patient waiting on us at 8:30. So I had to call Dr. Allen and say, Dr. Allen, get here. We got to open. We weren't supposed to open till 9, but that was fun with the ribbon cuttings and super exciting. I think we saw 46 patients that day. And now we see on average about 150 to 200. We've seen 300 patients in a 24-hour period. So we're busy all the time. And then the other picture that I have on here is this was the first helicopter landing. And so the fun thing about being in the emergency center is I get all the fun stuff. So, we have helicopters land in our helipad. So before we open, we had to simulate, how we care for patients, move patients. We did an active shooter drill. We had all of the police come from all the different counties, et cetera, come. But this was a fun day getting to practice with PHI landing. This was our first landing of a helicopter on the helipad outside. And now they come by my office every day, so I get to see that, but it's still a fun memory for me. And then, of course, COVID. I think that was a major disruptor to everybody's life. For me personally, my middle daughter, Morgan, was a senior. She is a softball player, so is my oldest daughter, and we're in the midst of her season. I think at that time they had only lost one game, and they were number one in the state of Texas at Oak Ridge, right down the road. And so it was sad for her. She couldn't graduate, go to her prom. We did some things to kind of help her, but it was just a sad time, just for me personally with her, because there was a lot of things I was looking forward to, but we made some fun things out of it. And then professionally, of course, it was a disruptor, not only just nationally because things were changing so much, but specifically to healthcare, to see us kind of, not be able to do elective surgeries and having to screen people for COVID, having staff out for COVID. So it was really, really challenging. We lost nurses to go travel because they were making a lot of money traveling. So it's just a tough time just in general, but I would say it's a significant moment, I think, in everybody's career. What have I learned? Like, what have you learned along the way? I would say my first thing I've learned along the way is change is inevitable. You have got to embrace change. If you do not embrace change, you're not going to survive very long. And so I just say you have to have a really strong change management practice or philosophy. You've got to accept it, embrace it, and roll with it. The second thing I'd say is always be true to your authentic self. That's so important to me because everyone else is taken. There's nobody else in the world like you. And so I really think that being true to your authentic self and knowing what your strengths are and what are your weaknesses, but always stay true to who you are. Have courage, go outside of your comfort zone. You've got to be able to get I was placed in EC, I was placed in areas outside the medical center. I was not comfortable, but I had to learn to get comfortable. And I think that's made me become a better person and a better leader. And then speaking up for what you believe. There are times when you're going to be challenged. What you believe in is going to be challenged, but you got to learn to have the courage to speak up. Another philosophy that I have and what I've learned is you got to work hard, but play harder. I would say that self-care and, taking vacations, all of those things are important. You can't pour into others. You can't be your best self unless you take the time like if you like to run, like y'all heard, I love to dance. That is like my thing. If I hear music, I'm dancing. And so I love to travel. So going to see places I haven't seen. So make time to do that because it's important. Another thing, give yourself grace. You're not going to get it right all the time. It's just not a part of who it is. So it's all about how you bounce back, give yourself grace. Don't be too hard on yourself. If you fall down, have the courage to jump up and start over again. Pour into others and give back. I think that as I've tried to do to others is pour into others. People poured into me. I think about all the people that came ahead of me and paved the way for me. I think about all my parents and my friends and what they've done to kind of help me succeed, and my leaders, my mentors. And so really try to give back. And then one thing I tell my little great nephew, I do have a great nephew, my brother's kids are older, is leaders are readers. And so when I start, I say, okay, Dion, I said leaders, and he goes, our readers. And so one thing in nursing, we have to be lifelong learners. Things change all the time, practices change, disease processes change. And so you've got to commit to that. My husband, he doesn't like to read a book. He likes audiobooks. So go get an audiobook. Get a podcast. I was listening to some podcasts in traffic yesterday. And so podcasts, we have so many things at our disposal, but make sure you're continuing to learn and you're continuing to read. This is a quote I wanted to share with you guys because I have a lot of favorite quotes, but this is probably one that I really love. Is I never lose, I either win or learn. And that's by Dr. Nelson Mandela. And so if you have that approach, no matter what happens to you, you're going to figure out, okay, I didn't win this time, but I learned. What did you learn? And so I would just like to encourage you all to kind of take that with you as well. I wanted to compare leadership and gardening. And so, again, I'm on the whole thing about bloom where you're planted growth. And so as a leader, these are things that I have to do to make sure that my team, they are functioning and they're thriving. And so as a leader, you have to provide the right amount of sunshine and water. So what is the sunshine? The sunshine is giving that clear direction and those goals. Like, what are we here for? And you have to give them enough water to sustain it. You can't water them one time and expect them to continue to grow. And so you've got to make sure that you are providing the right amount, but you also can't give them too much water and you can't give them not enough water. And so just trying to figure out what is that balance to make sure that you're continuing to grow. Prune frequently. And so you've got to learn to prioritize and focus on things that provide the highest value of work, and then killing off those things that really are wasteful and trying to see where is the most value for me. This is something I would say is hard to do sometimes, but you do have to prioritize. Pull out the weeds. So my job as a leader is move those things out of my team's way that makes it hard for them to do their job. If it's hard for them to do their job and provide good patient care, they're not going to do it. And so that's my job, is to remove those, recognize them early and make sure they don't fester. And then, like I said, condition the soil. You want to make sure that you're cultivating the culture. You've got to be a role model. You got to walk it and talk it. Make sure that, you are always looking at your culture, seeing what you can do better, making sure that you're using our policies and procedures and metrics to shape the culture of what you want the team to look like. So again, that role modeling is so important. And then last but not least, one thing that I hear from our finance guys all the time: without a margin, there's no mission. And so in healthcare, a lot of times we're not for profit, right? But we've got to make a margin in order to deliver on the mission. And so as a leader, I've got to make sure that I'm not spending money just for the sake of spending money, or using staff that I don't really need. And so supplies, making sure that I'm not wasting supplies, etc. So those are things that I have to do, and I have to make sure that my team is accountable for doing as well. know the mission and purpose of the organization. So wherever you work, make sure that aligns with who you really are. I would say in healthcare it's not easy, but it's definitely worthwhile. I have a primary, his name is Cody. He turned 21 years old. His mom called me on his birthday and said, "Hey, can you believe your baby is 21?" And just to have that connection, that means so much to me. That means that I was important to them and I made a difference. And so that's something that I always want to do, and just remember to make the difference. So that's all I have.
Awesome. That was awesome. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to jump into questions from students. So students, this is when you can start to put questions in the chat, the Q&A form, or you can raise your hand. Just remember that if you don't have access to your microphone, to let me know that so that I don't bring you over in questioning.
And I'm going to go ahead and kick off with the first question. So I love how everything is sort of threaded with lessons and leadership and just lots of good tips of wisdom in there, which we always appreciate because they want to learn about your field, but it's also like, if they can just trust that you've learned some things and take those and learn those lessons earlier rather than later, it's a great way to kind of be on the right path. You talked a lot about how sometimes you trusted yourself or you raised your hand, and sometimes people tapped you on the shoulder and said, "Hey, this opportunity might be for you." How did you navigate situations where you didn't fully feel prepared? Like, how did you kind of dive into those things where maybe you knew one part of the job, but maybe you didn't know like the leading of people or some element you had the handle on? How did you approach those situations when there was kind of some uncertainty around it?
So I felt like, and I'll give you the emergency center, just being a leader over that area. When my boss said, "Hey, I need a leader." So I didn't spend time at all on leading people. I spent time learning what they do. I think as a leader, it's hard to lead people when you don't know what they do. So I got on the front lines and I learned how to do every role in that, or in the EC, every role. I spent time with the staff. I did that for two folds, right? One, to get to know, the staff in the ER. So I was building connections. The hospital, the Woodlands wasn't open yet, but I had my staff at other places. And so I would go and I spent time at the medical center in the trauma room. I spent a lot of times at West Campus. Now, people will tell you I'm an overachiever. And so my husband tells me you do too much, but I feel like those connections and me taking the time to learn what I didn't know. I did a lot of researching. EC is totally different. There are levels of acuity. So I had to learn how to do triage, which triage is really sorting patients based on the resources that they need. That's a foreign language to me. I didn't do that in my role as a NICU nurse. And so I had to actually go pull out some books. I had to read and understand, okay, what does this level mean? And sometimes I didn't get it right. I remember being in the EC and I was up front triaging. Everybody I triaged was flagging shock protocol. Shock protocol, when you said that in the EC, everybody's like, "Oh my God, oh my God." Well, one of my nurses pulled me aside. She's like, "Juanna, what are you clicking?" So I went through and I was showing her. I was clicking that everybody's cap refill was less than 2 seconds. It's the normal is 3. But I was doing that not intentionally, not knowing. And so just having that comfortable relationship where your team will say, "Hey, Juanna, hey, can I show you something, show you how to do something?" So again, I think it's all about mindset, and you have to be willing to learn what you don't know and be honest about it. And so I would go to my providers and say, "Hey, Dr. Allen, can you show me how to do X, Y, and Z?" So being vulnerable, I think, and just knowing that there are resources out there.
Thank you. So we did have a student who submitted a question, but their microphone wasn't working. So they were asking which position has been your favorite?
I'm sorry?
Which position have you enjoyed the most?
Out of all my positions, I would say right now, I like this role that I'm in. I like the variety of areas that I lead. And so I'm able to, now I will say that this is a vulnerable position for me because I'm not the expert in every area. I know NICU, I know EC because I spent time in there, but I have to be humble. I had to go spend time in PICU to learn that. And so I like this role because of my reach and my breadth that I'm able to partner with people. I still am relatable. So, this morning I went upstairs to round with my team, which is my favorite thing to do. And I get to connect with them. Hey, how's your mom doing? That's important to me, kind of knowing where they are, what things they're up to, hey, when are you going on vacation? What's your favorite team? That kind of stuff. And so I think this role, because of my ability to really partner and leverage others.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. Jack, I'm going to bring you over if you can unmute. I'm hoping your microphone still didn't. They were asking about, how was your sleep schedule, if you don't mind them asking?
My sleep schedule?
Your sleep schedule.
Well, that's a tough
I
one.
also throw in another part of that, because that's a lot, and you took on a lot. You raised your hands for all the things. So in your bio, we talked about how you love traveling with your kids' sports and things like that. How did you find that balance of doing both and being present?
So I've got great leaders and I've got great friends. And so my leaders, I would say the nursing director job, which I'm doing now, is a hard job, right? But they say, Juanna, hey, you got to leave it there. There are seasons, like right now I'm down 2 leaders. And so right now I'd say I'm chairing the March of Dimes this year. I've got a lot of things going on, but my leaders are starting pretty soon. So I've already told my leaders, hey, I'm going to be gone this summer. I've got to get them up and running, but I'm going to be out. As a mother, it was very important to me to be there for my babies. They play competitive softball. And so, there were times where, I'd have to leave early to go to support them. And I think just having great leaders to do that, a husband and family that can pick up for you. In my earlier days, when my kids were a little bit smaller, there were times where there were some things at work I just couldn't make because my kids were sick or something like that. And so I would say work-life balance sometimes can be challenging in this role because, you're on vacation. But when you're on PTO, like I have a colleague that's on PTO now for spring break, I cover for her and she covers for me. And you just have to leave it. The hospital's still going to run. Only time I told them to call me is if the hospital's burning down. I would like to know that. I don't care where I am. And then there are some times where I'm forced not to connect. Like my husband makes me go on cruises. And so when I'm on a cruise, I can't connect. So I have to take my cruises. I'm going on 2 this summer. So, but yeah, good question. I would say what I'm trying to do now is I'm being more intentional about sleep, making sure I get adequate sleep. There are times when I'd say I'm not sleeping well, and that's normally something's troubling me. And so I do have to try to make sure I'm exercising, but I am committed to going to bed on time because that's a lot. It could be a lot. But good question.
Yeah. Okay, Jordan, I'm going to bring you over if you could unmute.
Okay.
Hi, Jordan.
Hi there. I have a question. So, how did you work with workers that might be lazier than older workers?
Oh, man. Jordan, that's a great question. So, I think when you are working with somebody who doesn't have your same work ethic, it's challenging. But again, remember I talked to you guys about courage. It's always easier to talk to the person one-on-one. When I first became a manager, I would want to share feedback on behalf of others. But what I learned very quickly in that role is that you can't do that. It doesn't impact the person when you're sharing it with them as much as it impacts the person that it's happening to. And so encouraging your team to speak up to one another. So if someone brings me a problem and they're having conflict with, whatever person it is, I'm gonna use Korean because I see her. My first advice to her, I listen to her. I always try to begin with the middle, like, why are we both here? But I always encourage people to talk to one another. You'd be amazed that people don't know that's their perception, but perception is reality. And then there's other times when the thing about culture that really helps with laziness in the workforce is if everybody is working at X and this person's not working at X, they're not going to survive in your culture because nobody around them is going to tolerate the person not bringing their A game. And so that's why culture is important. And so you naturally, they just won't be able to survive. I've seen teams do that well. And I've also seen teams where you kind of go in and you cover for them and you cover for them. But if it's a great culture and someone's not meeting the mustard, they're not going to hear from the leader. They're going to get it from their peers, and eventually they're not going to stay. It's just the way it is. So, but great question. Did I answer it? Jordan? Yeah.
Yeah. What did you say again?
I said, did I answer your question?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And I will say the not so fun part, but necessary part of my job is you got to hold people accountable. So when I was talking earlier about having clear expectations of what we expect, you know, the first time you give them a coaching, you say, hey, here are the expectations. You give them time. Hey, let me hear your side of the story. What happened in this situation? You give them clearly, here are the expectations. You can evaluate at the time. Maybe they need further training, explain it to them, etc. But then when it happens again, you got to hold them accountable. And so that's a big piece about nursing just in general, because unfortunately, we're dealing with people's lives. If we don't follow the 5 rights of medication, I'm going to use that, the right person, the right time, the right route, the right concentration, the right dose. Those are the 5, well, it was really 6 rights. But if we don't follow all 5 of those, we can have a mistake. And a lot of times it's the nurse that's at the bedside when she's about to administer the medication that can help that. We've got fancy scanners now. And so that's another thing too, you know, because to err is human, we're human. And so we've got fancy scanners. And so now I have a little device and I scan my patient, I scan my medication, I scan my patient again, and it'll give me a thumbs up. Yes, everything matches. And then I go ahead and proceed and give my medication. And so that's the thing about being in healthcare. You can make some serious errors. And so it's very, very important for people to understand the expectation. And if they don't, you help them through coaching, but then you have to go through counseling. And eventually, if they are still not making the right, if they're still making the same mistakes, unfortunately, we cannot continue to allow them to work with us. It's just a part of the process.
Great. Thank you for the question, Jordan. Okay, Kaylee, I'm going to bring you over if you could unmute.
Okay, hello. In very urgent medical situations, how did you stay calm and like take care of your patient when it was very urgent and you were trying to make sure that they had everything that they needed?
Oh, Kaylee, that's such a great question. My kids ask me that all the time. Lots of training. I will tell you that I am an ICU nurse I'll always probably be an ICU nurse. It doesn't scare me. I actually am very calm under pressure. But what I will tell you is that you've got a team of people around you. Everybody's got a role. So if it's a code situation, we always go back to what we were taught in nursing school is airway, breathing, and circulation, right? There are times when you may have to stop the bleed. That's important but you've got to have an airway first. And so it's prioritized. Remember, I talked about that because that was one of the things in nursing school was kind of challenging. Because when I was going through school and nursing school, all the answers are right. It's like, which one is the most right in the situation? And so going back to those basics And Kaylee, we do a lot of training. So we do what we call simulation, where we practice. And so we have like a mannequin in front of us. They cry, they grimace, they turn blue, their heart rates drop. And so we have to go in. Whenever I do my CPR training, I just had to do one a couple of months ago. I have to go practice and make sure that my compressions, you know, you're seeing it on the screen, whether you're compressing, it'll tell you go faster, you know, that sort of thing. And so we've gotten really fancy, but it is a lot of practice. And that's that continuing learning piece that I was talking about. Because even at my, you know, there's been times I've been on the baseball field with my kids, and I've had to go and enter it, you know, because that's a part that my trauma training helps me out with that. And so there are times I have to keep my skills up as well. So I'm always committed to making sure that I can still resuscitate, you know, a baby. I can resuscitate an adult if I have to. And so we do a lot of training on that. So that's a great thing about being in a hospital setting. We do get a lot of training. Great question. Did I answer it?
Yes, thank you.
And I will add to that too, you know, there are times, and sometimes we have what we call observers. And so if we're lucky, we'll have somebody just kind of standing back, and we call them the team leader. And so that person is watching to make sure that things are functioning well in the room. There's a lot of times where I have a role. If I come down and I'm not a part of the immediate team, I'm taking care of mom. So we all have a role in something that we could be doing. Whether it's if they need a runner, you know, I may have to grab one of my unlicensed staff members, say, hey, go run and get me the blood and all the things. So everybody's got a role. There are some emergencies that we have, such as a massive transfusion protocols, that we have these little badges. And so when you walk into the room, you get a badge, you get a badge, you get a badge. And so it has your responsibilities. Okay, you're the runner, you're the person getting the labs, et cetera. And those are some we have those on things that we don't do a lot, such as a massive transfusion protocol. So it's a great team, but we've got people watching us to make sure that we are doing what's right. I love it.
Another question come in.
Great questions.
Yeah. Had another question come in from Jordan. It said, how did you manage to cope to the changes in roles that you have gone through?
I would say with all of the roles I've changed into, I had a mentor with that, and I had somebody strategically that was either in a different department. When I came to the director role, like areas like perioperative services, I met with the directors of the perioperative services because I didn't know the world, right? Cancer and infusion, I don't know that world really. You know, it's sad to me. I'm like, oh my gosh, but I have amazing nurses that do it. And so having those partnerships and meeting with the leaders of those areas, that's how I stay connected, and I learn, you know, how they do things. We have quarterly meetings with most of our specialties. There's some specialties like the emergency center, we meet every week. Our PICU team, we have a little 35-minute call every Monday. Emergency center, we have a 30-minute call on Tuesdays. And so I'm not able to make those, but my leaders can, but I try to make those touch points with all of those leaders from across the system.
We are almost, I did ask just because you have done most of your career at Texas Children's. Would you say that's fairly typical, where there's most hospitals or hospital systems have those growth opportunities, or do you see people jump around a lot, or kind of what would you say is more that typical path?
Well, I would say that it's not typical to be at an organization this long. If you look at our CEO, for instance, hey buddy, if you look at our if you look at our organization, our CEO has been here 35 years, right? That's not normal. And so, like, for instance, I was doing a call yesterday with, we call it lunch and learns with leaders. And we had them as a question, hey, how long have you been here? Most of our leaders are brand new, but no, it's not typical to see somebody that stays in an organization, but I've had a lot of opportunities in those. So again, it just kind of, I think, shows your tenacity of stretching yourself. If you want to stay mundane and do things, there's, you know, for me to move to the emergency center, people thought I was crazy. honestly. People are like, how did you end up in the ER? But I don't think had I not done the ER, I probably wouldn't have been successful in my director role where I end up overseeing the ER, because I went from the NICU, which is like a subset world, into a totally different world. And so that kind of set me up for success by going to a different clinical area.
All right, well, we're coming, as Monica said, we're coming up on the 7:30 time, and I want to make sure to respect that for you, but also students. So students, can you put in the chat a thank you to Dr. Braden for joining us this evening. I have met you through LMC and done things with Texas Children's, and it's just great to learn more about you, and you guys do so much for our community here, and so we appreciate your support of joining us tonight. And yeah, all the things. So thank you so much. I'm going to ask if you could hang out just so we can take a stage smiling picture, as opposed to like, I got some, but I want to make sure that it's not like with your mouth hanging open and all the things. So students, with that, thank you guys. We have another session coming up on March 21st. You can find the details on our website, but we look forward to having you guys join us and hope you have a good spring break. I'm almost done.
For any students, the application is now out for our student internship program. So check out our website for some different opportunities to explore where you get a little bit more hands-on experience like this. So thank you so much.
Thank you guys. It was a pleasure. Good luck.
Okay, Monica, do you want me to snap a picture since you're on your phone? You get to be the one smiling. Okay, great.
Yes. I'm on my phone, and so my phone is less manageable in terms of everything.
Oh, gotcha.
I want to see Monica.
Okay, ready? Smile. 3. Okay.
Is that Mr. Cameron?
Thank you so much. Yes.
Yeah, it was fun. I hope it was okay, y'all.
I love the
Oh, it was
passion.
perfect.
I love
Yeah.
we had the opportunity to take our leadership group to HCA Conroe, and they just every single leader with against the folks in healthcare. It's just that passion of like, I love working with my patient impact. I want to be an excellent experience, like if I'm treating my mom or my right. And I love, thank you for sharing that with us.